So, following Tim Tszyu's dominant win over Dennis Nerja, rumour has it that he's going to be fighting Errol Spence next, and apparently that fight's supposed to happen this summer. And of course, Errol Spence has been out of the ring since he took that truly dominant beatdown from Terence Crawford in 2023. And of course, Tim Tszyu in those years has lost 3 fights, is currently on a 2-fight win streak. But safe to say, Tim Tszyu is far removed from his prime. He's not as good as he once was before the first Fundora fight. It feels like each one of those losses just took a bit more out of him. You know, the first Fundora fight was close, gets destroyed by Layoff, and then in the second fight gets stopped in a cut. In a fight where, you know, he was definitely game against Fundora. Tim Tszyu was able to land some shots on Fundora, but Fundora was just eating it and was just dishing out far too much punishment on Tim Tszyu. Following that, he then went on to go on a 2-fight win streak, with the most recent win coming recently against Dennis Nerja to become the new WBO international middleweight champion. He's now moved up to middleweight, and it's been believed that Errol Spence will return at middleweight. Following his last fight at 147, he'll be moving up to 160 to fight Tim Tszyu. Really, in my opinion, the weight won't make too much difference in how this fight goes, because I think it's established this fight would never happen at 147, because Errol Spence wasn't going to make 147 anymore, and neither Tim Tszyu. He's either going to be at 154 or 160. Realistically, could have been at 154 because it would just be one weight class up from Errol Spence's last fight, and of course it would be Tim Tszyu's career weight class. But both guys are a bit removed from their prime. You know, both guys are quite removed from their prime, in my opinion. So having the fight at 160, it is what it is, really. Looking at the footage we've seen of Errol Spence, and I've talked about this before, but Errol Spence doesn't look good, in my opinion. He looks slow, he looks clumsy, and he was always a bit of a clumsy puncher. He was a bit sort of head over his feet, forward, front foot pressing, but almost too much to a point where he wasn't balanced enough anymore. Errol Spence has always been a bit like that, but it seems like this time out of the ring and the damage that is accumulated over the years, it looks like he's just becoming a lot more slower and a lot clumsier, potentially a bit lazier with it as well. Whereas early on in his career, he'd at least be trying to remain balanced and keep himself in some somewhat fundamentally good positions. Looking at how he's hitting the pads, and again, hitting the pads isn't the same as a full-blown fight. It's not the same as a full-blown 12-round pro fight. So you can only take it with a grain of salt. But based off what I was seeing, his pad work, it didn't look great. It looked slow, clumsy. And it's making you think, you know, if he comes back and he's fighting the top guys at 154 like that, he will get run through. He will get battered. Granted, Tim Tszyu isn't a top guy at 154. Not anymore. He's lost to the top guys at 154. The guys who he's lost to are the top guys at 154. You know, your Murtazalayev, your Fundora. Even though Murtazalayev lost his last fight to Josh Kelly, still very much, in my opinion, a top guy. It will be purely because of boxing politics why Murtazalayev doesn't get another opportunity at a world championship, because he's, you know, unknown, still dangerous, but there's not a ton in it for any challenger facing him. Any champion facing him. You know, when he was a champion, people still avoided him, but at least he had a belt. Right, at least he had a belt there. But, yeah, talking about Murtazalayev, this video is about Tim Tszyu v Errol Spence. Rumour has it it's going to be happening in the summer, especially now that Tim Tszyu got through that last fight. Obviously, if he lost that fight against Dennis Nerja, this fight wouldn't be happening. But he did, and he's going to be fighting, well, reports say he's going to be fighting Errol Spence in the summer. Nothing's been confirmed. As far as I know, no contracts have been signed, no dates been confirmed, no locations been confirmed. But the reports are that following Tim Tszyu's win against Dennis Nerja, they will be targeting the Errol Spence fight in the summer. I do favour Tim Tszyu in that fight, purely because Tim Tszyu's been more active. Even though he's had losses, his performances against Fundora, they weren't necessarily bad. And then, of course, he did have 2 more wins following that, those 3 bad losses. He has got the advantage in terms of activity over Errol Spence. Errol Spence has been out of the ring for over 3 years. 3 years, and the last fight he took was a beatdown. That was bad. That last fight for Errol Spence was bad. That Errol Spence beat the brakes off this dude, right? So, and like I said, Errol Spence hasn't been looking good in the videos I've seen. So I'm going to have to go with Tim Tszyu for this fight if this fight gets made. Of course, I'll make a video nearer the time as well, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If this fight happens and who do you think wins? Let me know. Another episode of the Seth Solo Side Quest in the bag, and I'm out. Peace.